Hello there, today I'm testing the Canon 10D, a 6 megapixel DSLR from the year 2003. This year this camera model is, well, 20 years old, and this unit in particular seems to have survived very well. It looks very good still, the rubbers and everything, yeah. And also it works very well, basically flawlessly. Okay, there's one flaw that I noticed, but otherwise haven't seen any big problems. Unlike the Nikon D100 and D200 that I tested recently, this camera has a CMOS sensor, also APS-C sized. There's a lot of hype about the CCD sensor these days, especially the dynamic range and the colors get a lot of praise. I really don't have any idea if the CCD sensors from that time were better than the CMOS sensors, but I guess I will find out. The camera body is very well designed, the grip feels very nice in the hand. Overall I like it much more than the Canon D100, I like the controls more also, they're not the awkward film leftovers like in the D100. This one is a very well designed DSLR. There are also some bad points about the camera. For example, the viewfinder is not that big, but of course it's an APS-C sized camera. But on the D200 it is much nicer, for example. Other than that, well, it's a bit slow to write to memory and to show the pictures when reviewing and so on. And also the screen is kind of small, but the size is not the biggest problem. It loads the photos a bit slowly and it takes a while to see like a sharp version of the photo. So if you want to review the sharpness, it's not that convenient. And the same with the exposure, because you have to press also the info button before it actually shows the histogram. And also the screen itself doesn't have that much, let's say, a dynamic range, so you cannot really by the screen alone judge so well the exposure. There are also some weird things about the camera, for example the power button. First when I got it I was like, okay, let's turn on the camera, and well, there is no power button here. Okay, well then it must be somewhere else. And on the back you have two power buttons, one down here and one up here. Or actually it is one power button, because this one down here is the main power switch. The other one is for this wheel, and is basically a lock for this wheel. So it's a bit weird, but yeah, it's a bit inconvenient position to have the power button down here actually. Other than that, it has a clock battery, not so usual anymore, but at the time it wasn't that strange. But yeah, just need to remember to put a clock battery also, otherwise it loses the time when you change the batteries. The Canon 10D does not support EFS lenses, even though it has an APS-C sized sensor. And the reason for that is quite simple. The camera was released before the EFS mount was available, but as you can see, you can still mount EFS lenses on this camera, and you just remove this part from the back of the lens. It leaves the lens a little bit, let's say, exposed, the inner parts. So yeah, don't have it open too much, or find a part which can actually close this gap. I think you can find them on eBay, like special made parts, or you could just 3D print it if you have those skills. The reason you cannot mount EFS lenses onto the EF mount, or why you should not do it, is because this rear lens on the EFS mount goes much further into the camera, so it will hit the mirror. That's mostly a problem for the 35mm and APS-H sized mirrors though, since this lens was made for an APS-C sized camera, and well, that's what the 10D uses. It should in theory not be a problem. If you go to the widest, to 10mm on this lens, it still touches also on this APS-C size sensor, so it's not fully compatible even if you do these hacks. So yeah, be careful, avoid using the 10mm and use like 12 upwards if you use this lens. It might also be the case for other EFS lenses, so you just have to test, I suppose. Besides the 10 to 22mm lens, I'm also using a 70 to 300 Sigma lens. Kind of cheapish lens, but it's very practical, so it's quite nice to use. I'm at the same rocks as I always photograph at, also the tree I already went to. I'm so creative, but I'm mostly testing the camera, so it's good to have like similar locations and you should see a little bit like how the cameras compare. Of course the light should also be similar. Very sunny weather today, so yeah, of course landscape photography is not easy in sunny weather because the light is very strong and you get a bit too much contrast, but it can also work quite well depending on the subject. So I will look a little bit more what I can find here. I have already one location in mind. Using the Canon 10D was quite interesting. It's a bit different from the Nikon DSLR that I'm used to. The image quality, well, at least compared to the Nikon D100 again, it's not that big of a difference. I would say that the 10D has a bit cleaner files, but I like the colors a little bit more on the Nikon D100. I have not done enough shooting to be able to determine which sensor is better, the CMOS of the 10D or the CCD of the D100. I would have to do a bit more, let's say, involved or scientific test to be able to determine that. And then about high ISO quality, well, I actually just shot some photos. I'll put them up now so you can judge by yourself to see if the high ISO performance is good enough on the 10D. Would I recommend this camera? Well, not really. At least that's the short answer. And the same goes for the Nikon D100. And the reason for that is simply because there are a lot of things that get in the way when taking pictures, a lot of usability issues. So I would rather go for the generation after these cameras, like the Nikon D200 or the Canon 20, 30 or 40D. Okay, I have not used those Canon cameras, but at least the 30D should be comparable to the D200. If you like old DSLRs and the cams, well then definitely go for it, because it was quite fun to shoot with it also. I think that's all for this video. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Bye!